hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Kyle. I'm the Director of Alumni and Family Engagement. Welcome back to another special iteration of our Stay at Home with Pitzer College Art Galleries series. It's a collaboration between our office and the art galleries in an effort to keep our community connected during times of social distancing. We thank you so much for joining us today to hear from our next alumni artist, Edwin Gómez, class of 2008. We're incredibly excited to have him back for the special live recording for Pitzer at Home. But I would also like to give a very special thank you to our host and expert facilitator, Kiara Innes, who has been both a curator and director of the Pitzer College Art Gallery since 2007. We continue to be, incredibly grateful to both her and Chris for their willingness to partner with our office on this very special series of talks. And with that said, I'll hand it over to Kiara.
Thank you very much, Brandon, as always, for that lovely introduction. I'd also like to thank you and your office for partnering with us and say a very big thank you to Brooke Butler, who's unable to be here today for other reasons, for all her help as well. And of course, I would like to give a gigantic thanks to Chris Michno, Exhibitions and Communications Manager of Pitzer College Art Galleries, for his help with every aspect of this series. And of course, a huge thank you to everybody who's joined us today. It's great to see you all. So this series, as Brandon said, features Pitzer graduates who have pursued careers in the arts. And today, we have the great pleasure of connecting with Edwin Gómez, a queer Nicaraguan-American writer, director, producer, and actor, who will be in conversation with Media Studies Professor Gina Lamb. During Edwin's time at Pitzer as an undergrad and as a global local urban fellow for intercollegiate media studies, Edwin worked closely with Professor Gina Lamb and excavated the ways in which film and media can be used to create social change. His sophomore film, LA Sad Boy, premiered at the 2019 Outfest Film Festival, and his latest short film, JOYRIDE, was awarded Best Screenplay by the Latino Screenwriting Academy and was selected for a Latino Public Broadcasting New Media Production Grant, which premiered this summer at the 2020 PBS Short Film Festival, where it won the most popular award. His work blends the resounding beauty and exquisite pain of love and life while interrogating what we inherit from our bloodlines. Today, Edwin will be discussing his journey as a creative and the genesis of his work, among many other things. And Professor Gina Lamb is a media artist and educator dedicated to utilizing new media for social change in support of independent voices. Through experimental documentary production in collaboration with local arts and activist groups, youth and elders, she sees media art as flux for instigating ongoing creative community dialogue and development. Experimental documentary works born out of these collaborations have won awards and screened nationally and internationally at film festivals, museums, conferences, and in community spaces. Gina has taught media studies at Pitzer College for over 30 years and is the recipient of numerous prestigious awards. So in terms of the format, Gina and Edwin will speak for about 50 minutes, after which, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, after which we will open it up to questions from you. So please feel free during their conversation to put these questions in the chat, and I'll pass it on to them at the end of their talk. So please join me in giving a huge hand to Edwin and Gina and thanking them both very much for being with us today.
Thank you. It's so good to be with all of you.
Yes. Thanks, Kira.
Thanks for being here.
I'm going to start just as sort of an introduction of Edwin and I have been talking on the phone and on Zoom about when we first met. And I guess we first met right just before Kira ended up at Pitzer in 2006. I think Edwin was a sophomore. And I'm going to have to share screen because just to start it up, to sort of see some cute early pictures of Edwin. Edwin, in his sophomore year, sort of joined a class that I teach at Pitzer called Media Arts for Social Justice, where students collaborate with community partners to generate media projects. And normally I always have sites that are already going, and I only allow students to go to the sites that we have long-term relationships with. But at the time, the student comes to me and he says, well, I'm already working at an organization called Bienestar as a peer counselor. It's an HIV prevention organization that serves LGBTQ youth of color. And so I immediately wanted to support him in this because I was also co-aligned at that time. I was, besides teaching at Pitzer, I was also working full-time at an HIV prevention organization in LA, running a digital arts lab for LGBTQ youth. And so I knew I could support him in this project. And I was really taken that he wanted to create his own program as a sophomore in college at this Bienestar Pomona. And so that was sort of our beginning. And then watching him develop this program with the youth that he was working with at Bienestar and creating these poetry videos, I was just amazingly impressed with not just his ability, because he had just come out of taking intro to video production, but also just that Edwin is an amazing listener, creative person, a person that takes what he does in community so seriously and with heart, in wanting to make work that will resonate and empower young people to tell their own truths. And that's exactly what he did with this project. These are these early days. So a little shout back to 2006. After that, I'm gonna stop share for a second. He graduated, I guess, with a degree in arts and focus in media studies from Pitzer in 2008. And because of enjoying working with him so much in that class, I actually hired him to come on board at Reach LA for the summer after he graduated to co-produce a Queer Youth Nation program for Outfest that I was working with a group of LGBTQ youth every year. And we were doing a 90-minute program for Outfest every year of video shorts. And this is when I realized not only does Edwin have heart and knows how to work in community and build community among young people, but he also has like mad design skills and commitment to the arts in so many ways. So I was really taken aback. We had so much fun that summer with the youth designing. Here I actually even have a little copy of the card that he created that summer for the kids' video programs. And he also programmed an animation out of the card to go in the front of the video screening at Outfest. So it was really a fun summer of working together. We stayed in touch, but we didn't work again together until 2012. Well, actually in 2011, I worked with Media Studies to write a Mellon grant, a multi-year Mellon grant for the Media Studies program. It was a large grant, and one of the things that I wanted to write into it was an urban fellow, not unlike what the Community Engagement Center does at Pitzer, of having a liaison, a young person that's recently graduated from Pitzer College that comes back and helps develop and build relationships with the community. So Edwin was an obvious choice. We had other candidates, but Ruti, Talmor, and I both were, on the hiring committee, and Edwin, was the one that we knew that we wanted to bring in. And that was an incredible time. We had 3 years. It was great for me to be able to co-work with Edwin on these projects through Media Arts for Social Justice, the class that I was running. He was co-teaching with me, producing work, taking young people to festivals, film festivals. Some of the highlights from that time that he was able to create was he worked with me in finalizing a project with Trans Latina Coalition of Bambi Salcedo that was a health video. And there hadn't been that many at that time for Latina trans women. And this film actually screened at the International AIDS Conference in 2012 in Washington, DC, and then was picked up and distributed on a mass level through Central and South America and North America through the Pan American Health Organization as a, conversation starter for issues around trans women's health. And this was produced by students in the class, but Edwin helped me take it to the next level and to get it ready for distribution and all this kind of stuff. So it was having him on board allowed us to lift the program in ways that could have fallen by the wayside had we not had that support. He also was instrumental in the startup of 2 youth programs, one with Girls and Gangs, which is a video diary project where students in the class and Edwin would go out once a week working with girls and gangs in downtown Los Angeles to tell their stories through video. And then another one was the startup of Indigitized Youth Media Activism at Sherman Indian High School, which is a Native American boarding school in Riverside. And Edwin was instrumental in getting that program up and off the ground as well. And the youth were producing work with my students, but also that work was going to LA Skins Fest and other Native American film festivals. And it's continued. That program is still very active today. Also, while he was at Pitzer, and this fellowship was a 3-year program, ran from 2012 through 2015. He also worked, and I showed the image, but I'll share it one more time, with Ruchi Talmar on glyphs, acts of inscription. He worked on the festival catalog, working with the artists, and also the installation of the exhibition itself. So he really was doing such a multi-level, multifaceted types of projects of both community building, actual arts, creative production. It was just amazing what he was able to do. One more thing that I will show just really quick is he also started something that has now continued today as well, which I wasn't doing in the Media Arts for Social Justice class, but was bookmaking. So during the summer, that time for 10 years, I helped run the Native Youth to College program, where we brought in 15 to 25 Native American high school students to Pitzer College for a residential program. And we started making books in that program with the kids of their writing. And this is one of the books that Edwin actually created. He did the design of the book. Of course, the writing is by the students and the photos are by the students in the program. They did portraits of each other. But Edwin actually designed and put together this book that then was printed, and the kids all got copies along with DVDs of their final presentation at the end of the program. So this idea of making digital books and actually also hard printed books is something that we're still continuing today. But Edwin was the impetus for getting this started, and I really appreciate him for getting that going, because it's become another avenue of work that we're creating in that class. So it was amazing having him for those 3 years. It was my loss when the grant ended, but I think it was also his point or bridging point to move on with his own creative production outside of Pitzer College and what we were doing in Media Arts for Social Justice. But I just have to say that his unique history as an HIV/AIDS advocate and peer counselor, a domestic violence counselor, history and stories that have come out of community have informed his social justice work that has now moved into narrative film production. And so I'm going to turn it over. I just have to say that I'm incredibly proud of the work that he has not only done in the past, but now like exponentially proud of what he's accomplishing in his future with his narrative film work. So I'm going to turn it over to him and let him talk about kind of his experience first as an urban fellow and how that was kind of an alternative route for him rather than grad school. So
thank you so much for making me kind of relive all of the work we did. I know that during my time at Pitzer, and specifically as an urban fellow, we would have at least like close to 50 projects probably a year. I would say different kinds, film, print. The fact that Pitzer has these programs in which the students get to work with community and actually create short documentaries or whatever it is that a site needs. I know really embedded, not only like in my work, but just like in my soul, this idea that these stories matter and that the communities in which we work with need to be shown and showcased in the ways that I know you have continued to do even when I left Pitzer. So I appreciate the work that you do as an artist and now as a colleague. Um, really great to be back, really great to carry that whole spirit of social justice that I know was instilled deeply in me as a student at Pitzer and now as an alumni artist, you know, making my way in the world. I will say that it was an interesting journey going from documentary primarily being my medium when it came to filmmaking into narrative, because while they share a lot of affinity, they're very different in their machinations and in just what is asked of us, right? And I feel like there's something to be said about when we decide to make films, like where does it live, right? Are we making films that are indie? Are we trying to break into the system and create films at a studio level? And I think for me, what I think I left Pitzer with the most was what matters is that I am true to my voice, regardless of, you know, what path will be taken. So I guess I'll start with you know, at Pitzer, the media studies program is really wonderful in the sense of exploring like just cameras and using equipment and just going full force with specifically with your class or intro to video, like you're able to really explore whatever it is you like. But I think the one thing that I didn't get from my education at Pitzer was screenwriting. And it was mostly because screenwriting really wasn't available, at least when I was at Pitzer. I'm sure that things have changed a bit now. And so then you have this idea of like, how do I fill in the gaps that I'm missing, right? And I think that there's two routes there. And the first route being like grad school or getting your MFA at USC or UCLA or whichever film program is suited. And then there's also this idea of like being self-taught. And so I kind of left Pitzer feeling like, in a way, this urban fellowship was like grad school, you know, having TA'd, having listened to a lot of my friends and what they were going through in their grad programs made me realize that I kind of had already done that. And the fact that we were holding on to so many different projects at once and being in care of them, it really made me kind of have to decide, am I going, you know, the route of, and also coming from a working class family, am I going the route of accruing more loans, especially because film school is expensive? Or do I want to just kind of throw myself out there and figure out what it is that that I'm gonna do? And so, as strange as it is, or as funny as it is, I decided that I would pursue writing and directing from an actor's point of view first. So I spent, shortly after leaving Pitzer, I spent a whole year in acting classes because I wanted to understand what it meant to embody someone's words. I also wanted to look at what layers people were writing into their scripts, as well as just what I needed as an actor to hear to kind of recalibrate a performance. And so from there, which was around from 2015 to 2016, I just deep dove into acting. And then I realized, I'm like, I don't think acting is really like as much as I love acting, I still do act. I just recently did some voice acting that will be dropping next month on a streaming service. I could talk about it later. But what I realized was it allowed me to then deep dive a year of writing. And I think the one thing that I would say is always, I know people always say, write what you know. And I know that that seems so amorphous and it doesn't make sense, but really it's like, write what you've experienced, you know? And I know that that's really hard to do and very vulnerable. And so I spent 2017, you know, kind of working through what it is that I wanted to write. And something that definitely happened and was a catalyst, you know, just actually before leaving Pitzer was like my mother passing away, right? And so my mother passing away did a lot of different things to the point where like I had to just stop making my own work for a while. And what I was left with was the interrogation of what do we inherit, right? Not necessarily monetarily, not a house, but what do we inherit emotionally and what survives? And I think that that question kept coming up in all of the content I was writing, right? What are we carrying that is kind of just inherited from those who lived before us? And that really started coming to a head for me, and I still haven't been able to write about my mom directly in that way. I just recently started writing a play about her coming to the United States in the 70s, but even then there's only so much I can go currently. But all of those pieces of what I excavated are really found in those three films that I know we're going to get into. Just because it really was hard to just head on talk about my mother passing. And so in that year, in 2007, in the writing aspect and really going into film history, and the funny part is, where do you go and do that? Obviously you read, right? So like Save the Cat, I read everything that you know people recommend a new screenwriter read. And then like honestly, it was YouTube. And so then I made myself kind of, I did apply to grad school, and even with everything, that all of the experience I had, I didn't get accepted. And I know that, so for some people that would be like the end of the road. It's like, I'm not ready to keep going. But for me, it actually kind of lit a fire inside of me to really learn everything that I would be learning in an MFA program. To the point where I was like, I really need to start sewing together a lot of the things that I love with a lot of the things that are being taught, because I was also looking at what are people reading in grad school, right? And so for me, it was a matter of like kind of making that decision. And I'm not saying grad school is not right, because it is right for some people. And I think it's really important to know what it is you need, because some people thrive with the framework, you know, that a program provides. But for me, like I said, working with you, Gina, really made it feel like I was already taking those giant leaps and having to go into locations where honestly it was like a master class in figuring out how you were going to do something. Like when you're taking a camera out, you know, to film a tribe that is doing just their beautiful rituals and just their culture, but you're in nature, you know, you kind of have to be like, all right, how are we going to plan this out? And so for me, I really took that spirit into production. And luckily I found a lot of people who were down to just get messy and figure it out as we went. And so that's the one thing that I would say definitely is a cornerstone for me, is like, even if you are in grad school, you have to be the kind of person who's going to continually push yourself forward.
I would just interject right here is that we also had sort of conversations. We were staying in touch, and you know, you were questioning whether it's worth it to go to grad school, whether you want to take on more loans, because you were really working hard to pay off your loans, you know, during that time. And but then there was also, you know, I remember having conversations with you, well, there are these other routes, you know, like, because we had been involved in Outfest and different community festivals, where that if you make connections with sort of, you know, different types, a lot of these festivals, they don't just show work, but they also run writing labs or filmmaking labs or things like that. And there's ways to get connected. And you being the perfect person of having a very positive personality and outlook and an ability to build community, that's where I saw that you could potentially have this alternative route to doing grad school and doing it in the community-based kind of way of working.
Yeah, and I really appreciated that nudge too, because I think that sometimes, like, one thing that I realize is that in any discipline, right, with art, it's like sometimes you just have to prove that you can do it, and if you don't have the proof, then it feels impossible, and it feels stifling. And you know, working through and actually starting, like, art the reason why art and media studies and writing all came together in the sense of narrative film for me was through a lot of the exploration at Pitzer, where I started looking at installation artwork and mixed media and realizing I think that film is really what it is that I'm supposed to do, because it's blending all of those worlds. And you know, I feel like oftentimes um, an art career feels like winning the lottery, right? When you start getting one, it's like meeting with gallerists, like thinking of all the different layers at that time. I mean, it was almost like I'm taking a chance either way. I'm either making films or I'm becoming a fine artist or I'm finding a way of blending both. And I think that it kind of, I had to um, believe in myself and give myself an opportunity when other people didn't have any proof, right? And oftentimes, and I mean, I did have my senior thesis show, I did have all of the work that I did with Media Arts for Social Justice. I had all this proof of it being possible, having produced it with you, that then I took all of that and said, I'm gonna just bet on myself now. Like I'm gonna figure out how to do this, because even and I had one specific grad program I wanted to be in. And so for me, it was like, if I don't go to that film school, I don't want to go to film school, right? Like, because that's where I was at the beginning of my journey. But then what I realized was, well, what if I don't even need grad school? You know, and then that kind of led us to all of the things that happened here. One of them being I met some wonderful filmmakers, editors, and writers at this Latino Screenwriting Academy that Josefina Lopez, who's the screenwriter of Real Women Have Curves, was doing out of her theater Casa 0101 in Boyle Heights. And it was a week-long, just kind of like 8-hour workshop about everything to do with screenwriting. And so in that, I ended up writing Joyride, which is my third film that we'll talk about. But during that class, I actually took one day to go film with some of the students that were also in that class at the Santa Monica Pier, this 1-minute short that was for Outfest Fusion. Outfest Fusion is the people of color LGBTQ film festival in LA. And every year they have a 1-minute short competition. And it's always based around a theme. And the year that I actually submitted a piece and we made this film, this 1-minute long film in 5 days, I edited, colored it. It was, my brother colored it for me. My partner made the soundtrack along with Will Monroe, and I submitted it, and it ended up winning a grand jury award, which I was really surprised about, because out of the gate, it was my first real narrative piece, and it was only a minute long. And so what I'd like to do right now is actually just show it, since it is a minute long, to kind of show you the trajectory, right? So mind you, this is 2000.
He made this in one day. The contest had a limit of 2 weeks, but he didn't find out until a week into the contest. So he had 2 weeks to film and edit and submit. So
yeah, and write it, because I wrote it. It wasn't something I had on ice. I was like, and the theme of that year was staying quiet or speaking out, or an iteration of both, right? And so you'll see Quédate Callado in Spanish means stay silent, right? And so you'll kind of see the narrative kind of play out. So give me 1 second, cue it up for y'all.
Quédate callado, aunque duela, aunque cada célula de tu cuerpo grite. besarlo con la ternura que sientes. Quédate silencioso. Entierra el secreto en tu corazón. Dile ahorita. Solo quédate callado. Olvida los 10 años de amistad. ¿Me besas o te beso?
So, you know, it was just, and it was produced by Angela Pedraza that I met at the Screenwriting Academy. It was made with a lot of love, no budget, just paid for food. It was made with a budget, like a blooming director of photography, Will Prada, who was also in that class, just got together and made this 1-minute short, had to ADR all the, the voices and all of the sounds because, you know, when you're doing it indie and you don't have permits and the cops are like, what are you doing? You just kind of got to pretend you're doing nothing. So it was one of those experiences that I feel I was only confident enough to pursue because of having to figure out how things were going to get done the day of, right? Like I'm thinking of like filming, with Gina, I filmed like House and Balls, like the West Coast ball scene, kind of like Legendary, right? So you show up and you don't know what someone's performance is going to be. So you just have to be ready to like capture like magic on screen. And so that kind of basically put some air, you know, in my hot air balloon. And I was like, all right, out the gate, your first narrative piece, you get a grand jury award from Outfest. What's next, right? And so I ended up writing in 2016. Well, in 2016, I was very upset about just everything that someone in office, who we all know, was saying about Mexican Americans. And I myself am not Mexican American, I am Nicaraguan American. And I realized then that everything he was saying was about me because the assumptions that people have are just being someone Latinx here in LA is that I'm Mexican. So I realized that all of the things he was saying were all the things that some people honestly believe when they look at me. And so with that, I ended up having to funnel a lot of those feelings, a lot of that anxiety, a lot of now living under, you know, this presidency. It kind of created the need to write La Sad Boy, which you know, it technically should be El Sad Boy, but I was wanting to mess with gender, and so I used the feminine La to express that because I wanted to tell the story of my friend Georgie Goico, who was basically, he plays Sebastian in La Sad Boy, but he was one of the actors in the film you just saw, Quédate Callado. And we both just had so many conversations about all the expectations that we both had, him being Puerto Rican, me being Nicaraguan American, and having to come up against not being Mexican enough, right? Because it's like, you're not Mexican, so you're not Mexican enough. And then also on top of it, all the layers and stereotypes that get placed on you as someone Latinx, and then having queerness, you know, just thrown into the mix. We started talking about kind of our misadventures in dating. We started talking about just all of the things that were all the microaggressions that we would come up against. And so it led to this hybrid of almost like a documentary narrative film, which is La Sad Boy, which was actually just filmed in the summer, kind of was put on the wayside because you know, it got busy with work. At the time I was working for a domestic violence nonprofit. I was working graveyard shift. So I was helping families who were going through domestic violence. And I was just kind of still figuring out what was next, right? Knowing that film was really deep in my path, but not knowing how I was going to get there. And so alongside with Angela Pedraza, who produced La Sad Boy, as well as Quédate Callado, partnering up again with my DP for Quédate Callado, Will Prada, and basically just figuring out, basically everybody put in $200 that worked on it, the main folks, myself, the DP, Angela, and one of our other friends. And with $800, we made this film, La Sad Boy, that ended up premiering at Outfest Los Angeles the next year in 2019. Ended up having a pretty significant festival run. Luckily, I got into, it also was shown in different art exhibitions, specifically with the Amsterdam Queer and Migrant Film Festival. So it went to Zagreb, it basically went to Croatia. It was traveling through Europe for a bit. And right before the pandemic, it was actually going to be in another exhibition at a hotel. But it obviously with the pandemic didn't show. So I would love to just show you a really quick clip of kind of what happened there, right, with that piece. Also just to show that, you know, with not a lot of money, you can actually get a lot done when it comes to a narrative. Let's see. So I'm going to just show just a quick excerpt to give you the tone of the piece, and I'll talk about it a little bit more after.
Immigrants make everything look easy. Poof. Like magic. We make something out of nothing. In Puerto Rico, things move to a different rhythm. Music and magical realism are in our blood. We live in the poetry of Julia de Burgos, in Francisco Oller paintings, and novelas. Take this, for example. Te llevarán. Los ecos del viento me lo dicen. Los labios del mar lloran que sí. Te llevarán. Partirás y mis ojos que tanto te nutrieron bajarán quedamente. In this country, we are seen as your sexual fetish or criminals. The cholo of your dreams.
So this is basically a day in the life of Sebastian. It's his birthday. He's on dating apps or hookup apps, actually. He's kind of, so the genesis of this is he's on his way to a audition, and the audition is of a gang member, and he ends up getting that role, and then has to decide if he wants to continue playing by the roles that, you know, he's getting. And so in a way, the film becomes meta because the film that Sebastian wants to be in is actually La Sad Boy, right? Something that is real, something that is true, something that isn't just a stereotype or a typecasting. So that kind of comes to a head. And I think what it made me realize, because we were in competition with films that had whole governments behind them. Like we played at Outfest, we played next to a film that was funded by the Brazilian government. Of course, at that time, we didn't have Bolsonaro. You know, a lot of those film programs have been cut from that filmmaker. I actually spoke with that filmmaker recently and found that out. But, you know, I guess for me, the most important thing to take away from this is like, you cannot let like a lack of budget, a lack of equipment, a lack of anything. And I'm not one to say, because I usually go to a talk and they're like, you have a camera in your pocket, guys, make a film. Because it's like, I wish it were that easy. right? Because it's like, I'm just like, no, that's not helpful. But what I will say is that regardless of what you lack, what you have to really solidify in yourself is that spirit of it's gonna just happen, it's gonna come together, you know. And I know that it's crazy, and right now with the pandemic and with everything being the way it is, it even feels more impossible. And right now, since, you know, being on set isn't something possible, I recognize like I've pushed into writing new content. But that's to say that so this simultaneously happened as I won the Latino Screenwriting Academy short film contest, where they were going to make one short film. The film that I wrote that week during this workshop with Josefina Lopez was Joyride, which is the story of two teenage Latina sisters who break their grandmother out for one last joyride, right? And for me, it was one of the pieces that was directly related to having lost my mother, right? And for me, it was infused with all of that energy of my grandmother and my mother. My grandmother passed away when I was about 8, and then my mother had passed away, you know, just maybe 3 years before this film was even shot. And there was just something again that I realized I was interrogating. What are we inheriting from our bloodline? And for me, you know, a lot of the work that has been done psychologically talks about, you know, trauma being passed down through the bloodline, right? Like if you're looking at studies, it just shows how much more anxiety someone who comes from a bloodline that has suffered a lot of trauma or war or abuse, how it kind of impacts the generations after. And so I was so fixated on this idea that I thought, what is it that, like, why couldn't I heal some of this trauma or some of these things that have been passed down through my work, right? And just this idea of passing healing up the bloodline, as opposed to feeling like I'm just going to carry anxiety or trauma my whole life. So for me, that became just the centerpiece of Joyride, this idea of a grandmother who is holding on to a secret, the secret being, you know, and I mean, this film is available to watch in its entirety. But one thing that really started, again, going back and referencing Gina and the fact that I've been in community activism and in social justice work, I spent about a total of 7 years working in domestic violence, working with youth all the way to adults. And so for me, I started recognizing that one of the biggest questions people have for someone who is a survivor of domestic violence is like, why did you stay? You know? And for me, I needed to excavate that, just knowing my family history, knowing the fact that, you know, my grandmother went through domestic violence, you know, knowing that my grandmother also was an abusive mother, right? Like having all of these layers of an understanding of why my mom was who she was and now why I am who I am. It kind of led to the genesis of Joyride, which does deal with domestic violence, and in a not fantastical way where I'm showing violence, but rather showing the healing between these 3 women. So I think I'll just show you the opening sequence of that, just because, can I get a time check actually too?
Yeah.
How are we doing with time?
We're getting down to the wire.
Okay, perfect. I'll be really quick. I'll just show you guys this one clip and we'll keep going. Let's see.
Oh, I'm so excited.
It's a stupid idea, Karina.
Oh, it was Abuelita's idea, Marina.
Well, Abuelita's pretty sick.
Oh, God.
I don't even want to think what happens if Mom finds out.
Mom's not gonna find out, okay?
Temblando por ella, palabras sinceras y su alma viaja así, cantando como un pajarillo.
Marina, stop! Shotgun is always a DJ, okay? Shut up.
So, you know, the main thing about this film is they take their grandmother to the Grand Canyon, which is basically where she was asked for her hand in marriage to a very abusive husband. And so this is a journey to return that ring and to just basically throw it into the canyon so that it can't be inherited by these granddaughters. And it's available still on the PBS Short Film Festival website. And if you want to see the whole thing, it's about 14 minutes. But in those 14 minutes, we just hear kind of the history. We also see the relationship of these three women from the same family who, and like someone who is just really thinking about what they want their family to inherit or not inherit, really, in this case. So for me, social justice and all of these social issues have been such a deeply rooted thing in my work, just in general. And it's not that I plan it, right? I'm not like, hey, I'm going to work through domestic violence in this piece, or I'm going to work through, you know, microaggressions and dating and how we're just dealing with that all the time, right? As POC, like queer folks. So for me, it's just something that's baked into the work. So I'm currently right now re-editing the script for JOYRIDE, the feature version, which has been getting a lot of traction. The film will be showing at the official Latino Film Festival, and will be in competition to potentially be distributed by HBO. So cross your fingers, everybody. And then, you know, I think one of the things that I just want to say is the one thing that I feel is very critical is really knowing like what it is you love and just following it, whatever medium that is, not allowing it to be stifled by a lack of money, a lack of equipment. Like I know that it feels impossible and it seems crazy, but in like here we're saying, let's see, we're in 2020, like literally in 3 years, right? Like I was able to actually have a festival run, actually start getting traction and getting into some of these writing labs that a lot of folks are trying to get into to move on to their next phase of their own careers in film. And it really was, so the one thing is like this film won, JOYRIDE won the competition, the screenwriting competition was supposed to be produced for a grant by Josefina and a director that she decided was going to direct it. And so for me, I ended up having to take that project kind of back, and with the help of Angela Pedraza, the producer, one of the producers on JOYRIDE, I was able to kind of bet on myself, you know, and I think that that's one thing that I realize now. It's like, we have this idea that you're going to sell a script for $1 million, right? That someone's going to pick you out of a lineup of people and say, you're the next best director, you know, you're the one we've been looking for. But at the end of the day, I really don't think that people know what they want until they see it, right? Or they see that you can do it. And I think that's one thing that I'll say is, remember to really believe in what it is you're doing, and to make sure that you're making the work that that is true to your soul, true to your heart, because I think that any time that I haven't done that, things haven't worked out. But so far, every time I'm following those inclinations, you know, like I didn't get to grad school, and then I applied for a film grant. It was the first film grant I wrote, and I got it. And I was really surprised, you know, and that was through Latino Public Broadcasting. That's how I was able to make JOYRIDE. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure to get everything in. I'm not sure if I'm missing anything, Gina.
No, I think that's great. I am amazed and proud of you for taking that step of not accepting the offer when you won the literary award to have your film produced by, you know, this other director that you didn't feel, you know, copacetic with it to care for your writing. And then you just went ahead while you were waiting for that to come to fruition. You went ahead and applied for this PBS grant, and you got it. And you got $25,000 to produce the film when it was going to be produced for $1,000 by, you know, quasi director that's not, you know, somebody that really could maybe take on the project the way you want it. And so to step outside, to say, oh, I won this great thing, and to say, whoa, wait, I want to pull this back in and maintain control of my own destiny, my own work that I care so much that this is how I'm going to get it done. And that you had built a community of artists to have that happen. And you built a community of Latinx artists, you know, Latinx artists that you could work with, and that so you're supporting other artists in your path. So that's what I would say is that you really took this alternative. You didn't try and work for other people in the film industry. You took it on your own self in incremental steps, but by building community the whole way. So for that. And
thank you for reminding me of that, because the other thing was I was trying to become an executive assistant or doing all these extra things that I thought were a shortcut. And then I see some of my friends that have gone that route and they're assistants. And you know, there's all of those layers with how assistants are treated in the industry in general now. But then also this idea that you're still waiting for someone to say, hey, what do you have, right? Like, what do you have on ice that I can read? And then it's like, when you're working 12, 14-hour days as an assistant, you know, or a PA, like you don't have time to do those things. So finding that, you know, supporting the other artists, like I feel very lucky that I've been able to work with so many wonderful BIPOC, you know, directors of photography, just finding anybody who aligns with me and also needs a chance the way I did. You know, that's a cornerstone of what my work is like too. Because I think sometimes it's someone saying yes, like the way that you said yes, Gina, to being an urban fellow, right? Like it's like taking all of those yeses and not focusing on the no's. Because there's been so many rejection letters, there's been so many, you know, not getting into a festival that you thought was going to be the festival to make it, that you were sure you were going to be in. Like I think just honoring that art ends up being born where it's supposed to. Yeah. You know, like you have the right people aligning with you. That's what I remember. I sent the nicest like email back after getting a rejection to this writing lab that I ended up still getting into. So always send a good email and be really nice, because you know, you never know. But one thing I wrote in that, and I remember I wholeheartedly wrote it, I said, I'm a firm believer that projects end up where they're supposed to be. You know, and if this isn't where it's supposed to be, I know that will come. You know, I hope that a space opens, and of course this summer a space opened, and I was able to be in the Scenic Juanon lab, which typically takes place in Mexico, but obviously with the pandemic it was digital. But just knowing that you can't stop with no's, and you really cannot just, you have to give people a chance sometimes, even if it scares you or you feel like, no, I shouldn't do this. It was hard. It was hard having trust, that much trust. But I knew that people like Gina existed, like Kira, like Rudy Talmore, like there's people who will say yes, and I want to be able to be that person in the lives of others. You know?
We want to do more what you do. Maybe we should open up to questions at this point, but you've given opportunities for other Pitzer students who have worked on his films as well, alums. So that's a cool thing. Alegria Martinez worked on La Sad Boy, right? Or,
Yeah, actually,
yeah.
Alegria worked on La Sad Boy as a PA, and she couldn't work on Joyride, but definitely open. If anybody has questions or needs any connections, like I'm always open. I'm an open book because for me, I've come across a lot of different people in the industry who are very like guarded, and for me, I'm really open to helping those who are really trying to break in, because right now honestly is the time to break in, because everybody's at the same level. Like right before the pandemic happened, all the writers fired their managers, right? So it's like there's a lot of people who are not represented right now. So it's like we're all kind of, it's like the Wild West when it comes to film. And that's it. Like Alegria was, it was great to have her on set for La Sad Boy, and that was at the beginning of the journey, you know. And thank you so much, Brandon, for sharing the link to the film. I don't know if everybody saw that in the chat, but that's where you can see the full film.
Yeah, we should put your website in there as well.
Oh yeah.
I think your generosity is extraordinary, Edwin. I really do. And I think that you should come back and give lectures to all of the students here. I think everyone can learn, and not just the students, everybody can learn so much from what you've just said. It's really impressive, and your achievements are so impressive since, you know, leaving Pitzer such a short time ago. It's really amazing.
That means a lot, Kira. And yes, I'd love to. I know how hard it is. I know, especially like being an art major, I know that it feels especially being in Claremont, it feels like you're kind of in this little protective bubble of art, and then like you get into the world and you're like, wow, this is really different. How am I going to do it? You know, and I would love to, you know, come back, especially and help and talk, because I know that this is just the beginning still. So it's kind of funny to give an art talk before the full journey has happened. But I definitely have been very blessed, and I feel very lucky that I've had such wonderful advocates such as, you know, you and Ruti and Gina and all the folks at Pitzer and media studies. You know, Eddie Gonzalez was one of the reasons why I was able to graduate and saved me so many times. And then it was wonderful to work with him too, you know, just as someone who is so knowledgeable. So I would love to come back and definitely continue talking and sharing.
You clearly give so much to other people, which is very rare, you know, in our worlds, our professional formal art worlds. I know that we've come to the end of the time, but I just want to make sure that you see some of the chat, some of the conversations in the chat. People are just, you know, really inspired by your work, and we will actually be archiving all of this, so you'll be able to see this. Does anybody have a final question for Edwin before we say goodbye to him and thank him so much? And to Gina, thank you also. I think everybody's just taken aback, actually.
The comments too, really appreciate it.
Yeah, they're great comments. So then it remains to give a huge hand to Edwin and Gina for spending their evening with us tonight. And yeah, exactly. It was really, really, really amazing.
Awesome.
So thank you. And I hope that, you know, we have the pleasure of seeing you on campus soon.
Definitely would love to come back. I know, I hope everybody stays safe. I know that this year has been very different. But as soon as we can all get back together and be safe, I would love to come back.
Great. Well, thank you. And thanks again, Gina. Thank you both.
Thank you, Karen. We'd love to see everybody on campus.
Yes, we would. That's for sure.
Other at campus too. And having Edwin would just be a bonus.
Yeah. As soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yep.
So much, Gina, for everything. I'm only here because of all of your support and all of your mentoring and love. And I say that from the bottom of my heart, because I know that it really has brought me to this place. So thank you.
That's super sweet, but you've got it in you. You're doing amazing work. So I'm just amazed, and I'm glad that we stayed in touch, and I can see all your progress, because it's so exciting.
And thank you to everybody that helped organize this.